The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the sharp scent of fresh electricity you sometimes get when a charger kicks in, but something heavier, burnt, metallic, wrong. When I looked out the window, I saw smoke curling slowly into the night air, rising from the hood of a bright white Tesla sitting in my driveway, as it belonged there. For a second, I honestly thought I was imagining it. Then the car started screaming, alarms, flashing lights, that horrible electronic panic sound modern cars make when something inside them realizes things have gone very, very bad. And standing beside it was my neighbor Karen, staring at the cable connected to my solar outlet like it had personally betrayed her. The strange part? None of this surprised me, because by that point, I had already been watching her for days. Night after night, right around the same time, my batteries would drain. My lights would flicker. My house would fall silent while the rest of the neighborhood slept comfortably, their air conditioning humming. At first, I blamed my equipment. Then I blamed bad luck, but eventually the numbers stopped making sense. And when I finally discovered what Karen had been doing with my power, well, let's say the smoke rising from that Tesla wasn't exactly an accident. At first, the outages didn't seem like a big deal. Solar systems aren't perfect, and anyone who owns one knows that sometimes things just act up. Batteries age, inverters glitch. A cloudy day can throw off the balance more than you expect. So when the lights suddenly cut out late one night, I figured it was just one of those annoying little technical hiccups that come with running your own grid. But then it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Each time it was the same pattern. Everything would be fine during the day. My panels would charge the batteries like they always did. The system monitor showing healthy numbers, nothing unusual. Then, sometime after dark, usually around the same window of time, the power would just vanish. Lights out, fans dead, the quiet hum of the house disappears all at once. The first real inconvenience came when I opened the fridge one morning and realized the milk was warm, not slightly cool warm, completely useless. The freezer wasn't much better. Ice cream had melted into a sad, sugary soup, and a pack of frozen chicken had started that unmistakable, halfway thawed smell that tells you dinner plans just got ruined. Then the Wi-Fi started dying too. You don't realize how dependent you are on a router until the little lights on it suddenly stop blinking, and your entire house feels like it's been dropped back into the early 2000s. No internet, no smart thermostat, nothing responding. Just silence and a slowly rising level of frustration. At first, I blamed the equipment. Maybe the batteries were getting weak. Maybe the inverter had decided to pick the worst possible week to fail. I even spent a couple of evenings checking wiring, running system diagnostics, and scrolling through the usage logs on the display panel. That's when things stopped adding up. The number said my system was losing far more power overnight than my house could be using. Not a little more. A lot more. Enough to drain the batteries like someone had plugged in something massive and let it run for hours. And that was the moment a new thought crept in. One that felt ridiculous at first. What if the problem wasn't inside my house at all? By the fourth night, curiosity had officially turned into determination. I made some coffee, turned off the lights inside the house, and sat near the window where I could see the driveway without being obvious. If something strange was happening to my system every night, I wanted to catch it in the act. Midnight came and went. For a while, nothing happened. The neighborhood was quiet in that heavy, sleepy way. Suburbs get after everyone's gone to bed. Streetlights hummed softly, and the occasional car passed somewhere far down the road. Then, a little after 12:30, I saw movement. Someone was walking across the edge of my driveway. At first, it looked like a shadow sliding across the pavement. But as the figure stepped closer to the light from my garage, I recognized the robe, the oversized slippers, and that unmistakable confident stride. Karen, if you've ever lived in an HOA neighborhood, you probably know the type. She was the unofficial queen of the community, always patrolling for violations, always quoting bylaws like they were sacred scripture. The kind of person who could turn a slightly overgrown lawn into a 3-page complaint letter. But what she was doing that night made my brain stall for a second. She walked straight up to my solar charging outlet with a thick cable in her hand, popped open the charging port on her Tesla parked partly in my driveway, and casually plugged the car into my system like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stared through the window, honestly wondering if I had fallen asleep and was dreaming. Then the charging lights on the Tesla flickered to life. That was when I stormed outside. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I asked, louder than I intended. Karen barely flinched. She turned her head slowly, as if I had interrupted something mildly inconvenient. "Oh, relax," she said with a dismissive wave. "I'm just charging my car." "From my house," I replied, pointing at the cable. "That's my solar outlet." She actually rolled her eyes. Well, technically, she said, dragging the word out like she was explaining something painfully obvious. Anything visible from the street falls under shared community infrastructure according to the HOA guidelines. Your solar panels are visible, which means they benefit the neighborhood. I blinked at her. That's not how electricity works. But Karen just shrugged, leaning casually against her Tesla, like the conversation was already over. You've got plenty of power, she said. Don't be so dramatic. That was the moment I realized something important. Karen didn't think she was doing anything wrong. She thought she was entitled to it. For a moment after that confrontation, I actually believed the problem was solved. Most people, once they're caught red-handed in someone else's driveway, tend to rethink their choices. There's usually at least a flicker of embarrassment, a moment where common sense kicks in and tells them they've pushed things too far. Karen didn't have that moment. The very next night, right around the same time, I heard the quiet crunch of footsteps on the gravel outside. I looked out the window, and there she was again, strolling into my driveway like she owned the place. Same robe, same cable in her hand, same relaxed confidence. She didn't sneak or hesitate. She simply walked up to the outlet, plugged her Tesla in, and leaned against the car while the charging lights blinked awake. It was almost impressive in a twisted way. I stepped outside and reminded her, calmly at first, that she had been told not to touch my equipment. She barely glanced up from her phone. You're overreacting, she said. The board would never have a problem with this. That sentence explained everything. Karen wasn't just being rude. She genuinely believed the HOA protected her. In her mind, the rules weren't something she followed. They were tools she used. She had probably spent years telling neighbors what they could plant, what color they could paint their fences, and how long their grass was allowed to grow. Now she thought those same rules made her untouchable. And the consequences kept piling up for me. The batteries drained faster every night. My house kept slipping into darkness just when I needed power the most. Groceries spoiled again. The router died again. Every morning, I checked the system logs, watching the numbers climb higher, showing exactly how much electricity had vanished into that car. I tried reasoning with her one more time, but it felt like arguing with a brick wall wearing a bathrobe. That's when something shifted in my head. If Karen believed she could take my power whenever she wanted, then clearly, words weren't going to stop her. So I stopped thinking about arguments and started thinking about solutions. The next morning, instead of arguing with Karen again, I called someone who actually understood electricity better than anyone I knew. Greg had been an electrician for almost 20 years, the kind of guy who could stare at a breaker box for 10 seconds and tell you exactly what every wire in the house had been through. When he answered the phone, I explained everything from the beginning: the mysterious power drain, the midnight charging sessions, and Karen's creative interpretation of HOA rules. At first, he thought I was joking. Wait, he said between laughs. She's just walking into your driveway and plugging her Tesla into your solar system like it's a public charging station? Every night, I told him. There was a short pause, the kind where someone realizes you're not exaggerating. Well, Greg finally said, that's a new one. When he came over later that afternoon, I showed him the outlet, the inverter setup, and the system log showing the power disappearing night after night. He scrolled through the numbers slowly, whistling under his breath. She's definitely pulling a serious load from this thing, he said. No wonder your batteries are dying. Then I told him what I was thinking. Greg leaned back, crossed his arms, and gave me a look that hovered somewhere between concern and amusement. For a second, I thought he might refuse. Instead, a slow grin spread across his face. You know, he said carefully, technically there are ways to make a charging line behave unpredictably. Within an hour, we had the inverter panel open. Greg adjusted settings, rerouted a few connections, and modified the output limits in a way that would never bother my house but could seriously confuse something drawing heavy power from that outlet. When he finished, everything looked completely normal from the outside. The charging port worked. The system lights blinked the same way they always had, but now the outlet was a trap waiting for someone greedy enough to use it. That night, I didn't sit by the window because I was suspicious. I sat there because I was waiting. Around 10:30, right on schedule, headlights rolled slowly into my driveway. Karen stepped out of her Tesla, cable in hand, humming like nothing in the world had changed. She plugged the charger into my solar outlet with absolute confidence. Inside the house, I watched and waited. For the first few minutes, nothing unusual happened. The Tesla's charging lights blinked softly, The same calm pulse they always made when the car was pulling power. Karen leaned against the driver's door, scrolling through her phone, completely relaxed, like she had done this 100 times before and expected to do it 100 more. Inside the house, I stood near the window with the lights off, watching the quiet scene unfold. Part of me wondered if Greg's adjustments would even do anything. Maybe the system would just behave normally, and Karen would walk away with another free charge. Then I noticed the first thin ribbon of smoke. It was subtle at first, just a faint gray curl rising from somewhere near the front of the car. Karen didn't see it. She was still absorbed in her phone, occasionally shifting her weight while the charger hummed softly. A few seconds later, the Tesla made a strange clicking noise. Then another. The charging lights flickered. Karen looked up, confused, just as a sharp electrical crackle snapped through the quiet night air. The car's dashboard suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree, warning messages flashing behind the windshield. A high-pitched alarm erupted from the vehicle, the kind of sound designed to tell you something expensive is about to go very wrong. Karen jumped back. What the? More smoke pushed out from under the hood, thicker now, rolling into the cool night air. The charger cable twitched slightly where it connected to the outlet. That was my cue. I grabbed the fire extinguisher I'd already placed near the door and rushed outside like a concerned neighbor responding to a disaster. Karen was pacing near the car now, panic written all over her face as the alarms kept screaming. "My car!" she shouted. "Something's wrong with my car." "Step back," I said quickly, pulling the pin from the extinguisher as another puff of smoke burst from the front grille. A small lick of flame appeared for a split second before vanishing behind the rising haze. I aimed and blasted a cloud of foam across the hood and the charging area. The extinguisher hissed loudly, coating everything in thick white spray until the smoke finally began to thin. Within seconds, the alarms faded, leaving only the quiet tick of hot metal cooling down. Karen stared at the car, then at the cable, then slowly at me. Her expression shifted from shock to suspicion, like she knew something terrible had just happened but couldn't quite prove why. I lowered the extinguisher and looked at the Tesla with careful concern. "Wow," I said slowly. "That's really strange." The driveway was quiet again by the next morning, but the story didn't end there. Cars like that don't simply cough up smoke and move on. A Tesla throwing alarms and smoke tends to start a much bigger chain of events, and sure enough, within a few days, Karen was deep into the next phase of the drama insurance. Apparently, she had the car towed to a service center first. I only know that because a flatbed showed up early one morning and carried the thing away like a wounded animal. After that, the neighborhood grapevine started doing what it does best. People talk. Especially when someone who usually polices everyone else's business suddenly has a very expensive problem. From what I heard, Karen filed an insurance claim almost immediately. At first she seemed confident, probably assuming the company would simply cover whatever electrical damage the car had suffered. But insurance companies ask questions, simple ones at first. Where was the vehicle when the malfunction occurred? What type of charger was being used? Who owned the charging equipment? That's where things started getting uncomfortable, because the moment Karen explained the location, the next question became unavoidable. Had the homeowner been permitted to use that charging outlet? And if the answer was no, well, suddenly the situation didn't look like an accident anymore. The claim was denied. Just like that, the repairs became her responsibility entirely, and from what I later heard, the estimate wasn't pretty. Modern electric cars are complicated machines. When their systems fail in dramatic ways, the price tag tends to follow. After that, something about Karen changed. She stopped leaving notes in mailboxes about lawn heights and garbage bins. She stopped patrolling the sidewalks like a self-appointed neighborhood sheriff. And most importantly, she never stepped into my driveway again. The nights went back to normal. My battery stayed full. My lights stayed on. And the neighborhood finally felt quiet again. Looking back on the whole situation, I still find it a little surreal how something as simple as a charging cable turned into weeks of frustration and one very expensive lesson. Part of me almost wishes Karen had just listened to the first time I asked her to stop. It would have saved both of us a lot of trouble. But I guess some people only understand consequences once they finally meet them. Now I'm curious what you think. Did Karen get what she deserved? Or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what you would have done in my place. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more HOA drama and neighborhood showdowns.